Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. We're now at the second half of December, and the purpose of this video is to analyze the new elements that appeared in the last week or so in the statements of crucial players around the war in Ukraine. And that is in the statements of President-elect Trump, in the speeches made by President Putin, and in the very interesting encounter of Trump, Macron, and Zelensky in Paris. This is the purpose, and there are very important new developments and the tonality and the episodes and details of these statements. So there'll be three sections to this video: the domestic developments in Ukraine, the domestic developments in politics in Russia, and then the statements of Trump in the context of these new developments, with the conclusion as to where we will end up in view of these developments. I start with the domestic developments in Ukraine. The most important one is that the Ukrainian society is splitting up. There was a video earlier I was talking about the unraveling of Zelensky's regime, but what I mean now is that there is a kind of an impasse. No political forces in Ukraine seem to be ready to conclude peace if Trump offers it. Zelensky continues to be as intransigent as he was 2 or 3 months ago, which means that they continue to talk about membership in NATO, returning lost territories, either by diplomatic means or by military means. They're talking about security guarantees, membership of NATO right away, the introduction of European forces. In other words, there's absolutely no desire to concede anything. The question, of course, is why. And the reason is that the real masters of Ukraine are the right nationalist forces from West Ukraine. This is the same story with Zelensky as it was with Poroshenko. Zelensky started out with the platform of concluding peace based on Minsk Accords, and as time went on, he was more and more fulfilling the program of the nationalists from the West. So now it's the same thing. You have new position of the United States with the coming new administration. You have a very clearly stated position by Russia about 4 provinces and neutral status for Ukraine. Zelensky says no, 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 no. Why is he doing that? Well, the reason is, of course, that he cannot afford to lose the support of the nationalists, because if he does, then he's going to be overwhelmed by those who had said that we were willing to do that all along. So this is the Zelensky's problem. Now, another problem that he came up in his dealings with Trump and with Putin is that he's got no legitimacy. His term expired last May. Moreover, the term of the parliament, the Rada people, has also expired. So his signature on any accord is absolutely useless, and nobody would pay attention to it by any future presidents or prime ministers or whoever. So the first thing they have to do is to have elections, and I think this is increasing pressure from the US that they do it. However, if they do, the person who is likely to win is Zaluzhny, or one of those who are even more nationalist and who would not be in the capacity to sign any deal that would include loss of any territory. And if they do, what is most likely to happen in this case is that the west of Ukraine will split. It would say, no, we're not part of it. We don't want to. We want to join NATO. We want to have Polish and French troops on our territory, which may actually come. And in that case, you would see what I've been saying all along, and many people, that the conflict in Ukraine is not a Russia-Ukraine war. Conflict in Ukraine is a civil war where the East split up. And then it was supported by the Russian state because the people who live there are Russian. Now, the same thing may happen actually now in reverse, is that the west of Ukraine will split from the Ukraine that are ready to sign a deal with Russia, or be occupied by Russia. And these people will split, and then the rest of Ukraine say, wait a second, how about the unity of the nation that you were talking along all along? And in that case, you would see clearly that it is Ukraine that is being torn apart by its divergent forces. The East tending to orient itself to Russia, the West staunchly orienting itself to NATO and EU. Okay, so that's the problem of Ukrainian politics. Now let me focus on the Russian trends. What's most interesting is that attentive observers who watch what President Putin has been saying notice that he used the word Novorossiya, New Russia. Now, in my many previous videos, I explained the long history of Novorossiya, which is the territories that are a part of today's Ukraine and the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, but were historically populated by the Don Cossacks, by the Russian settlers who received their grants from Catherine II in the 18th century. These territories were given to Ukraine, Soviet Socialist Republic, by Comrade Lenin in order to strengthen the rule of the workers who were Bolshevik or communist or whatever. In other words, when Putin is now saying that it's no longer a question of Donbass, but also that Novorossiya, the Russian people who live in Novorossiya, deserve their freedom of choice, etc. This kind of talk hasn't happened since 2014. And of course, the observers, including myself, ask why all of a sudden now we have a revived talk of Novorossiya, which basically means territories around Kharkov, Odessa, Nikolaev in the south of Ukraine and north east. The question, of course, is very interesting, and the answer seems to be in the current trends in Russia. I've been listening very attentively to various discussions of generals and politicians and observers and academics and so forth. And what is becoming increasingly clear is that Putin's formula that he publicly pronounced in June 2024, that 4 provinces plus the non-NATO status or neutral status of Ukraine is not good enough. And people are openly saying that that is fine as a starting position, but that's not the ultimate objective. And one of the generals was saying that there's a kind of a rumbling going on in the army, saying that what are we fighting for? We're fighting against neo-Nazis. We're fighting to restore Russia. And then why should we stop and give away Odessa to neo-Nazis, to EU, to NATO, to American bases, as they build new ones in Poland and Romania? No way. We are not fighting this war to have that kind of a deal. Better no deal than this kind of deal. Now, it seems to me that Mr. Putin hears a public opinion very well, what's going on in Russia. He's a skill. He feels the mood of the people very well. And I think the mood of the people is not to stop at the 4 provinces and not to give up any more territory to what was proclaimed officially to be a neo-Nazi regime. Now, here I also want to say that the events in Syria actually strengthen the hand of the more hardliners in Russia who want no compromise and to continue the war until victorious end, until capitulation of the Kiev regime, as they put it, that the Russian troops enter Kiev. The events in Syria, in a sense, that they have been interpreted, perhaps correctly, as a setback for Russia. They also were interpreted that Erdogan, who is after all Turkey, is a member of NATO, acted behind the back of Russia to grab some territory, broke one more time the agreements with Putin, which makes a conclusion very obvious. You can't trust the Turks. You can't trust any guarantees or agreements with NATO, and you can get a stab in the back at any time. And so what's the point of agreeing to something that is done by people who broke it over and over and over again, such as Minsk agreements and the agreements with Turkey. In other words, the setback in Syria made the never again syndrome stronger in Russia and made people much more reluctant to agree to any kind of a compromise on the current in the current situation in the forthcoming negotiations with Trump. So these are the trends in Russia. In other words, what I think President Putin wants is to start negotiations, to give a chance to Mr. Trump to succeed, to continue at the same time, to continue the advance, to create new realities of the ground, which would be satisfactory to those hardliners who want to continue the war. And at the same time, to firm strongly to hold to the position: no NATO bases, no foreign troops, no zones where some kind of European forces are going to enter as so-called peacekeepers. None of that is acceptable. So Putin is trying very hard to please those patriotic forces who want to continue until victory, and at the same time to give Trump a chance to come up with his peace proposals. Now, and finally, about the position of EU, that actually is exacerbating the situation, and it more and more looks like they want to continue the war. They don't want any agreement, especially in view of the statements coming from NATO, from Macron, from the new foreign minister of European Union, the Estonian Kallas. Estonia, 1 million people, and she speaks for 300 million people. Very interesting. And then she speaks for whom? Does she speak for France? Well, Macron speaks for France. Does she speak for Germany? No, Baerbock speaks for Germany. Does she speak for Hungary? Hungary has their own speaks. Who is she speaking for? What is this weird new title? A foreign policy something for the European Union. Weird. Anyway, the problem with the hawks in European Union, with types like Macron and Steinmeier and Baerbock and Merz and Kallas, is that there's a crisis in each of their own countries. Macron is in terrible shape in his own country. He broke the agreements with other parties. His government was overthrown. He's holding on to power just because he's got 2 more years, but in fact his approval ratings is falling. The farmers are in rebellion. There's all kinds of political crises going on in France. Same thing in Germany. In Germany, the vote of no confidence is coming. The new elections are coming. The Merz of the Christian Democrats positioning himself as a hardliner who wants to continue to fight and threaten Russia. So with the kind of EU, Russians have no incentive whatsoever to trust any word of the current leadership of EU. In other words, the intransigent position of the EU leadership makes Russia want to continue to fight, because the only guarantee is their own presence in the rest of Ukraine, rather than any kind of agreements with the European Union. In other words, European Union makes things worse for those who want to find a compromise and some kind of a deal. And finally, what is the conclusion? My conclusion of the current situation at the end of December is that war is likely to continue, because even though Trump wants to wind it down, his conditions of some kind of a ceasefire and the presence of European troops and giving it on to the Europeans, his conditions are not acceptable to Russia. They are acceptable to start the negotiations and to see what's going to happen. But in the big picture settlement, that's not the kind of settlement that is acceptable. So war is going to continue. Europeans have nothing but words. They have no money, their government's in disarray, they have no army, they have no desire, and most importantly, no desire in their populations to confront Russia militarily. That shows all opinion polls in France, Germany, even Poland. So that's where we are. The war is going to continue, and the Russians are going to continue to win until the West decides that enough is enough and settles for a real negotiated multilateral peace settlement. Thank you very much. Subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to read my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin, available in the description. And see you next time. Bye.